Welcome to Discourse. That's Retha.
That's Tony.
And today we're talking about Lily of the Valley by Rebecca Lebron. So Lily of the Valley is a collection of short stories that explore spirituality and the soul in different and interesting ways. Each story is different, but I feel like each story is trying to teach us a lesson.
So I wasn't sure if the stories were about her life in particular. Maybe some parts were taken from her life and experiences she's had, because sometimes characters would have different names, things like that, or it's maybe following people that she knows and their stories.
Possibly. I think there are fictional stories. In one, she talks about a group of friends that there's two boys and a girl, and then the people start talking bad about the girl behind her back, and she kind of gets alienated. But then in the end, one of the boys realizes that she wasn't stealing for drugs. She was stealing because her family was poor, and it kind of shows you that your preconceived notions or the preconceived notions of somebody else put upon you is often not correct, and you should try to be open-minded and talk to people about the things that are going on in their lives.
I think a huge part of living is to fully have that human experience is to also get to know one another, connect on a deeper level, kind of live in someone else's shoes, and to understand things, because everybody's life is different, everybody's experiences are different in life, and it is interesting when you sit down.
Yours is like vanilla cake. Right? Your life is the same thing every day.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of screaming kids and torture.
What I liked about this book was that it took the idea of the soul as like its own thing, and then in different short stories it talks about how the soul inhabits your body, and then what happens to it after you die, and then what happens to you before you're born. And this book is very spiritual.
Yeah, very.
References to God and religion and faith throughout most of the short stories.
So in the last chapter she does talk about the soul and the spirit being two separate almost entities, and that when we're born at birth they're both placed into your body. I feel like that in itself is such like a, what's the word? Is it metaphysical?
Yeah, I think it's metaphysical, visionary. Yeah. It's definitely ethereal,
right?
I would say, right?
Yeah.
These stories often are abstract, and they're talking about the idea of the soul and the universe and people as an idea. What I like about these stories is they're short and like potent, right? Like they get their idea across, and then you're moving on to the next story. A lot of them are spiritual, but I think I'm going back to that one story where there's talking about three kids, or they're all friends, and the girl is kind of alienated because they're talking bad about her behind her back. And it's one of the few stories that have a bit of dialogue in it, right? Because in most of the stories, the author is talking directly to the audience as the narrator. But in this one, there's a bit of dialogue, and it's pretty funny. It made me laugh because it captures how teens talk. In this short story, it's called Judging Others, right? It's a good title because that's kind of what it's about. So in this one, Kevin said, "Hi, Shannon. What's up, girl? You're looking so fine with your bad self." She looked at Kevin with an attitude, then said, "Who's your friend?" He said, "Curtis, and he's from Georgia." "Hi, Curtis, I'm Shannon." Kevin said to Shannon, "Watch it, girl." Shannon said, "Talk to the head." She was with a New York attitude and also a hottie. Kevin liked that about Shannon. Right?
That is so funny. I think I enjoyed that more, you reading it than anything. That was hilarious.
I know. So I'm reading all of these like metaphysical, kind of like spiritual short stories.
And then you get this boy, "Hey, hottie."
Yeah. And then we get this short story of these three teens in, I believe it's like Brooklyn or New York. They just have like these total New York street dialects that you could imagine. And it was just funny to go from spiritual to like street kids.
Right. It's so funny.
And then there's another one. So again, this was like a one-off for me. It was funny and engaging, and it also taught a good lesson. But there's other ones, like there was another short story I read about giving change to the homeless, the needy on the street that are asking for change, right? So a lot of people just walk by them because they don't want to give them change. In this short story, it talks about how giving change can be a euphemism for something else. Helping somebody else out giving them some things that you're not needing, a lot of things that you throw away, you could give to a homeless person or a needy person as change, right? That's the change that you would give them.
Oh, so you mean not just the coins, the change, but actually giving them a change in their life.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good layers in this story. So what was your favorite short story?
I think out of all the ones that I read, I think I enjoyed, it was chapter 11. It was titled Time, and it just talks about like the constructs of time. So in that chapter, she discusses a lot about time, like as it being like this linear construct.
So this collection of short stories is entitled Lily of the Valley. What is Lily of the Valley? That's what I was asking myself before I started reading this. And in one of the short stories, in the very beginning of the short stories, we get an explanation of what the idea of Lily of the Valley is.
Okay, good.
So let me read that. This short story is entitled The Valley Field. The valley field is this world. The lake in the valley is our body. The lily in the valley lake is our soul. Our body houses our soul, which lives in this world. So I'm glad I got to read that quote, because that is a really good encapsulation of how metaphysical and spiritual these short stories are, or at least the majority of them are. This is written by Rebecca Lebron. She's an immigrant, and she explains in the beginning of all of this that oh my God, it's so heartbreaking story too, of her life. Like when she was a child, she liked to write, but her parents thought she was writing notes to like boys and stuff. And they were like, don't write notes to boys. And she would have to like hide her writings and like sometimes like destroy them.
She would crumple the paper up and put it in her mouth and eat them.
It's so sad. It was heartbreaking. And then she goes on to explain how she finally left that situation because it was bad. She immigrated to another country, and then she started writing. I believe it was freehand, because then she explains how her daughter actually helped her turn this into a digital format. Her daughter helps her, which I think is awesome. Great job helping your mother turn this into a digital book. And I just had these ideas of her and her daughter sitting together late at night, like in the kitchen, and she's explaining to her daughter, like, enter this, and her daughter's asking her questions about all these interesting things her mother wrote. And that had to have been a powerful connection between mother and daughter in that situation where they're sharing these stories that their mother wrote.
I suppose maybe at the very beginning, like her real life story, I connected with the most, just because I like you said, you could see it, you could feel those moments happening between them. And it's such a beautiful and amazing thing, especially with her not having the greatest family, relationship with her parents, and growing up, having that with your own children is pretty magical in itself.
Yeah, I think her story was interesting right off the bat. It was a great start to the book, because it really colors the rest of the short stories, because now my mind is from the mind of hers, right? And I'm seeing all of these stories as like an immigrant would see another country, which is why it was interesting to see her perspective on homeless people or the kids, the youth in the streets of New York, and how they interact, and seeing the perspective of the world from her eyes was interesting. And then again, we get just an infusion of spirituality throughout the whole thing.
And I also find that older generations too are much more spiritual and religious. She very much so is, and I kind of enjoyed listening to all the questions that she has and all the answers that she has for herself, and how she is very dedicated to her faith.
Yeah, I really appreciated her dedication to her faith, and the way she was able to articulate her dedication to that faith, and the more abstract ideas of the faith. Again, the idea of the soul and things like that. She explains it in very flowery language in very different ways. And it's all very interesting. And I liked that the stories were very short. Some of them were like a page or 2 pages. Some of them ended up being a little bit longer, a couple of pages, but some of them were short. And I can imagine you reading these like while you're waiting in line or waiting for the bus or something like that. So they're all very easy to read, and a lot of them, after you're done reading, you just put that down and just start thinking about the stuff that just painted in your mind.
Yeah, it's like we discussed. It is a lot of the questions are very metaphysical, like why are we born? Like, what's the reason?
Yeah, what's my soul doing in my body?
Yeah, what happens to our
I've got a soul in there. Get it out.
Yeah. what happens to the soul after you move on is, all these things. Everybody has all these questions. So I feel like the book and all the short stories have not only morals, but also these types of questions, which gets you thinking.
Yeah, it's all very interesting. A lot of things that she explained, I didn't even consider or imagine until she explained it.
And the very last chapter, was really cool how she talks about, your soul and your spirit, they're waiting around before it gets put into your body at birth. Like, they're just waiting around in, this world. Like, everybody's soul, everybody's spirits, they're intermingling, they're talking, they're chatting, they're forming connection. So it got me thinking, okay, people are basically just reborn by their souls and their spirits. And so when you meet someone and you feel like you've known them forever, I think that's what it is. You really have known them.
They used to hang out in the past.
And they used to go out for drinks. And so now, that's why you feel so connected with strangers or with people that you meet, and they become such, integral parts of your life, because they always have been, not on this plane, not on this planet, but spiritually and through your soul in that other world.
I think they call that kindred spirits, right?
Yeah, kindred spirits. I actually really enjoyed that last chapter when I was reading.
So her own mini biography at the very beginning was a very good setup to the stories, and then the last chapter was a very good wrap up.
Yes, I loved it.
Let me read this another quote from the book. It's from the short story "Please Step Forward," and it speaks to kind of what you were already saying, how the idea of the soul being something other, and I don't know, just the idea of the soul is just its own animated thing in the world.
Yeah.
And she explains it in so many different colorful ways that I am just completely failing at. So if you're you're failing and I want to know, then just read this book, because it's really good. So here's a quote. "The soul knows things our minds never dream of. Only if our soul wants our mind to know something will it make our spirit remember." Right? So again, the body, the soul, different, and your soul will whisper things to you that you have never considered before. And that's kind of like what you were talking about, kindred spirits, or something that just inside of you, and you're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
It probably came from your soul.
Yes. And that actually reminds me of one of the other chapters where, she was talking about following your life purpose and fulfilling your life's journey. But you have to listen to your soul. You have to listen to the wind and this incredibly spiritual connection with your soul and the elements, and just to understand your purpose and the truth of your inner self, to live your life not only as a good person, do good things, live rightfully or what have you, but also find your meaning, your soul and your spirit's purpose. I thought that was a really interesting chapter, and I kind of connected with that a lot, because I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm feeling more and more spiritual, because we didn't grow up very religious, so I never really had that part. But spiritually, I get it. There has to be more to life than just what is here. Spiritual stuff, being connected with the universe, whether it be with science and all these magical type of things, I truly feel like I'm starting to get closer and closer to that as I get older. And so I really connected with the spiritual part of this book. Got me thinking a lot, and it makes me want to question more and to think more like that, abstract.
Yeah, I thought this was a great book as well, to get you thinking about the soul, the idea of the soul, that you have one, where it might have been before it came to you. It's all very interesting ideas that, like I said, when you read them, it's great that it's a short story, because I needed to put it down and just let my mind wander about what was just said.
And digest it all.
Yeah, and you need time to digest it all.